Traveling the Vortex.
We join the Doctor as he travels the Vortex and arrive at episode 551. And there's just something to be said for the Perpetual police box. At least we can always recognize it. I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
I'm Glenn.
How's it going, guys?
Pretty good. How's it? We've been off for about 3 weeks, so we're all coming to the podcast with all kinds of stuff that we did in those 3 weeks, right?
I've done some stuff.
You've done some stuff. I've done some stuff.
What'd you did?
Oh, well, I was going to ask if everybody had seen the new Spider-Man movie.
I have not.
Oh.
Well, that's okay. We won't. We won't spoil it. But I saw it and I thought it was really, really good. I think it's probably better than the first one. In ways, there are things about the first one that I liked better, but I like that this one just kind of jumps into it and just goes, and it never really stops. Occasionally it lets you come up for a breath, but then it just goes right on with the action. I kind of like how this particular one, without giving too much away, is more of a Spider-Gwen story. At least she is our anchor character in this. And so I kind of like how they've done that, because now you can kind of look at things from a different perspective, but you still get Miles's, story in this. And it kind of sets Miles to the side so that you're kind of seeing it from a different point of view. And I really like that. And I think the relationship building in this one between those two characters is done really well. But really enjoyed it. I thought everybody did a great job. It was very unpredictable. I did not see a lot of things coming that happened. There are a lot of really cool cameo things and Easter eggs, and I need to see it a dozen more times before I catch everything, I'm sure. But I thoroughly enjoyed it.
What he said. It's amazing. It's certainly on par with the first film. I haven't quite decided yet which one I like better. I think the first one has a little more humor to it that I appreciate, because the themes and the weight of everything that's going on in this one is much heavier. Because the stakes have gone up. It's not to say that it's not funny, because it is. But there's a part of me that wants to say, well, I like the kind of lighter touch of the other one better. But then, man, the story in this was just so good. So they're kind of jockeying for position. So it's at least as good as the first one. Mm-hmm. It again, not without spoiling anything, but it opens with kind of a very similar narrative structure to the first one, but with Gwen kind of taking you through, her origin story. And it's so detailed and so involved and so well done. And there's so much of it. I mean, it felt like it was probably half hour or so of that. And then the title card comes up. Yeah. And my brain literally had to go,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's like a whole movie still.
One of the longest pre-credits scene I've ever seen in my life.
Wow.
But it was amazing. Like, if the end credits had rolled at that point, I'd have been completely satisfied walking out of the theater. That's how good it was. But I did. I had to stop and go, oh, yeah, there's a whole movie here still. So it's really good.
Now, you've done your Flicks with Friends review for it, right?
I have recorded it. I have not yet posted it.
Well, I was gonna plug your Flicks with Friends, but I suppose watch for that on Flicks with Friends. I did have a little more in-depth review in my blog, Trapped in the Vortex, which I got started again a few weeks ago. So,
woohoo!
Nice.
Keith, did you do anything exciting?
Oh, I did watch a movie, a different superhero this time. Shazam! Fury of the Gods.
What did you think?
I enjoyed it. I think I liked it maybe a little more than the first film, just in the dichotomy between Shazam and the villain wasn't as drastic. I didn't feel the just the tone of his character going up against the seven deadly sins and all of that from the first film just seems so starkly different that I didn't enjoy that aspect of it more. The villains this time didn't feel so far off to the other end of the spectrum. It felt like it brought both of them closer to the middle, and I appreciated that aspect of it. And I thought it was pretty fun. Not a bad little superhero film. Nothing amazing, but it also was just a nice, refreshing romp, really, more than anything.
It's a bit overshadowed with the shuffling that's happening over there at DC, but
yeah, and because I like Zach Levi, and I like him as Shazam. I've seen some complaints that between the kid version and the adult version of the character don't act like they're the same person, and I can see that, but there's so little of the kid version that you don't really think about that unless you really stop to think about the movie too much.
What else?
I also read a book, Doctor Who Players.
Oh, I did too. Well, see, here's the thing. When you get an extra week, because we were supposed to take 2 weeks off, but somebody was so busy that they couldn't get this one done that we're reviewing this time. So I thought, well, why not? Well, why don't we...
I'm now 2/3 of the way through Endgame also.
Oh, okay. Why don't we wait on Players? Because I think you and I might be able to relate a little bit to World Game. So...
Okay.
I also read a book, not a Doctor Who book. I read Another Fine Myth by Robert Asprin. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this. It's a myth series, and apparently there's about a dozen or so books out there. And he died, I think, in early 90s, I think. And one of these co-writers that joined him later kind of took over and has taken the series on even further out. But this is the first book, and this has been around since the 1970s. I think it came out 78. And a friend of mine was huge into these series when I was in high school, and he wanted me to read them so bad, and he practically begged me to read them, and I just never did. I never got around to it. And so I stumbled across a copy in a used bookstore, and I thought, okay, well, now's the time. It is so good. It's so funny. It's not really high fantasy. It's it really kind of feels like that same kind of fantasy that we saw in the new Dungeons and Dragons movie, where it's dragons and things like this, but it's more kind of that grounded modern humor, which makes the characters a lot more relatable, I think. And so, I wouldn't say this book's got a lot of humor in it. It's maybe in the vein of kind of a Douglas Adams book, but not quite Adamsy. So kind of in that realm of anachronistic humor throughout the book, which makes it a lot more, which is what makes it good. It makes it a lot of fun. One of the main characters, Oz, is a demon who, in my mind, he had like a Brooklyn accent. And just some of the things that he relayed just came across that way off the page. So, but it's really good. It's a lot of fun. I have actually picked up and started the next one, which is the name of the books now. Myth Conceptions, I think it is. All of them have a play on the word myth. So
nice.
But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
If you are interested, Mel is a huge fan of that series.
Oh, is that right?
And owns, 8 or 9 of them. So I have them here at the house.
Oh, excellent. Well, now I know where my source is.
So, we can hook you up. I haven't read them myself yet, but when we first got together, she was like, "You got to read these sometime." I'm like, "Okay," and so now they got added to the pile.
Well, I had picked it up the first book when I took Caitlin over to Kansas City to the airport because she went to DC with her choir 2 weeks ago, I think it was. And that's when I'd found the book. And so when I went back to pick her up, I was already about 2/3 of the way through the book and knew that I had seen the second one there. So I specifically went back and got the second one. So, and I saw that they had a bunch of them as well. I don't know beyond the second book in what order they have them, but I do plan to pick more of the books up. So for myself, I don't reread books very often, but occasionally I'll have one that I've really fallen in love with and I'll end up rereading it. And I think I really kind of feel like this will be a series that I would probably go back and reread someday too.
Very cool.
Anything
John,
else?
did you get anything else done?
We went and saw Little Mermaid. I don't think I told you guys that.
No.
It's good.
Sarah and Gemma went.
What did they think?
They didn't make it all the way through. Gemma got bored.
Didn't make it all the way through.
They got to land, and Gemma got bored.
It's good. It I have said before that I think the Disney live action remakes suffer from two different types of issue. Either A, it's a shot for shot remake of the animated film, in which case I say, why bother? Or B, it's a vastly different version of events. They've completely jettisoned all the stuff that we loved from the animated movie, in which case I say, why bother? Why not go tell your own story? And I understand the hypocrisy of that. I very much get that I'm that impossible to please person because I complain about both ends of it.
Mm-hmm.
And this one is, honestly, it kind of straddles the line. It's got a foot in both worlds. It's very, very beat for beat the animated film, but they do some things differently. They do take a couple of risks with stuff and change it up. And it's got some beautiful singing, some fantastic acting, particularly Melissa McCarthy, who just is absurdly excellent as Ursula. And she's really channeling Pat Carroll. It was that impressive. I think probably my only real complaint about it is the color palette's a little drab. I was really looking forward to seeing the splendor and the beauty of the Beneath the Sea, and we didn't get that. And I thought, well, maybe they're going to save it for the land stuff so that we see the boring and the humdrum and the mundane through Ariel's eyes. And even it was kind of bland and washed out. I was like, oh. So I think they missed a trick there, because I think that would have been a good opportunity to either way to enhance and beautify it a little bit. But other than that, it's probably, it's not the best live action version of a movie ever that Disney's done, but it's up there.
I don't know if it was.
I heard visually that it was very dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that plays into it with it was just a little drab. Yeah.
It's interesting that the one actor that you focused on was Melissa McCarthy. With most of the reviews, that's everybody's least favorite performance. So
really,
it's kind of interesting that you came to it with
I hadn't heard that. I thought she was fantastic.
I don't remember which Tuesday night it was, but we saw you getting refreshments at the concession stand before you went into one film, because we were over playing Friends Trivia.
Oh, nice.
My youngest is obsessed and has gone through the entire series, probably on their third time through now.
Oh, wow.
And so we went to this thing, and thanks to him, we took it home. So we won the whole thing.
Nice.
So, yeah, that was something else we did. A lot of fun.
I'd say it would have had to have been, we were either there for Little Mermaid or Fast X.
I was going to say, Fast X was out that week, like the previous weekend, and I only saw you and Mel. I didn't see Shy, so I wondered if maybe that's what you were seeing.
No, we had Shy with us.
Oh, did you?
Mermaid,
well, maybe I just didn't see her.
Yeah, I don't know. We get over there occasionally if the stars align on a Tuesday. So, well, congratulations to your trivia win.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got a gift card to see a film now, so probably use it on a Tuesday so that we can afford for all of us to go. So I think it's only a $25 gift card, but Every little bit helps.
Hi, I'm Rupert Booth.
I am known as Paul Ferry.
And my name is Barry Williams.
Together, we host Time Ram.
Time Ram's a cruel mistress.
It's a random number generator.
That also.
We roll a number from 1 to 13, and that's our doctor. Then 1 to 300 for the story, and then we ram them together.
Even if it doesn't make sense.
Cruel, I tell you.
Time Ram, putting the wrong doctors in the wrong stories, so you don't have to.
You're listening to Traveling the Vortex.
Anything else before we move on to news?
Well, I listened to Big Finish story, and that will be my something new 2-minute review. I listened to The Lost Stories, Doctor Who, The Ark. So this is a Big Finish production where they found, or some archaeologists found the original script to The Ark in Space, and they adapted it and turned it into an audio adventure, and it is really good. It's very, very different from The Ark in Space. The premise is the same. You know, the Doctor, Harry, and Sarah Jane show up on the Ark, and things have kind of started to go awry, and they start helping people thaw out, and there's an alien menace that is on board. But the alien menace is vastly different, and it leads on a different path all the way through. It's got Sadie Miller as Sarah Jane Smith, who I think does a little better of a job this time than the last story we had listened to her on. And Christopher Naylor as Harry Sullivan was spot on. It sounded exactly like Harry the entire time. The story is interesting. It's an interesting what if. The Doctor is written very differently from the Fourth Doctor we're used to hearing in this. It's almost written with it feels First Doctor feel to it, because he's a lot more thoughtful. He's a lot more thinking things through, 7 steps ahead of everybody else of what's going on, which at times plays to the Fourth Doctor's strengths of being aloof, but it feels like he knows kind of more than what he lets on. And it's got some great action. It's a really fun way to explore what really could have been with this story. And that is my something new 2-minute review.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to listening to those. I'd seen they were coming out now, and there's another one, the Daleks one, that I think looks like a lot of fun too. So
you just gotta keep in mind as you listen that it's the alternate universe version of events.
Right.
Although, other than, they could have taken this story and plopped a different Doctor and companions in it, and it probably would have stood up okay. Because this is, the Ark in Space was at least the second Ark story we've had.
Yeah.
So it could have easily worked as its own original Big Finish story, not being a lost story.
They all say, who is Doctor Who?
This is Tim Trelaw.
This is David J. Howe.
I'm Peter Purvis.
I am Sadie Miller. This is Lauren Cornelius.
Larry, it's Fraser.
For all things in the Doctor Who collecting world and beyond, the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. I'm Larry Van Mersbergen, your host, and I've been collecting for 42 years. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex on the Direction Point Podcast Network.
All right, well, let's move on to news then.
Our first bit of news, we got a classic companion coming back in the next season. Bonnie Langford will be reprising her role as Melanie Bush.
Yay! It's
alongside
interesting.
The 15th Doctor.
It's one of the companions that's never been at the top of my list of companions, but somehow I'm very excited now that to have her back, because I almost kind of want to see where this character picks back up, afterwards, because there's a lot, we've gotten a lot of Mel in Big Finish, but that Mel, at least what we've listened to, was just continued travels with the 6th and 7th Doctor. And so the character doesn't necessarily grow all that much or change all that much over that time. I think we've all said that we like Mel, and the audio is a lot better because they do a lot more with the character. They do try to expand the character. But I'd like to see, after so many years without the Doctor, well, number one, I want to know how the heck she got back, because we talked about this for Power of the Doctor, but how the heck she got back to Earth, present day. And maybe she can fill us in on, her adventures with
Savalon
Glitz, yeah. So maybe they found some sort of time travel ring and got her back. I don't know. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. But yeah, I'm excited to see Bonnie Langford return.
I agree. Pretty much word for word.
I agree. Pretty much word for word.
All right. Well, let's move on to our next bit.
They have also announced a casting for a mysterious Duchess role, and that is Indira Varma. I'm not sure I pronounced that correctly.
I think that's right, yeah. Varma.
It's Susie.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I wonder if there will be any reference to that. I have a hard time believing there will be.
I doubt they will either. But, I mean, they've done that with Gwen, and they've done that with somebody else. Martha, yeah, where they talk about the similarities in their, past characters that they've played as far as relations to them. But yeah, no,
the actress has grown and changed so much since then.
Yeah,
that I it took me a little. It wasn't until I saw it in an article I was like, "Oh yeah, it is Susie, isn't it?" That seems like so long ago. She's done so much more since then.
Yeah, excited to see what they do with her as well. We don't know a lot about what her part entails, other than she's playing a Duchess. So. Another one coming up, this next bit of news was kind of an interesting one, but now that I've kind of let it set it in, I see why they're doing it.
The Evil of the Daleks is going to be novelized by Fraser Hines, an inventive new retelling of this classic story, coming out as a novel.
I think that's what intrigued me was when I first saw it. I think Jonathan Peel did the first novelization of this for the Target novelizations, and I thought, well, what was wrong with his? Why would they? But I since they're framing it in a retelling of the story, I think maybe this will take more of a Jamie perspective, which I think is kind of a unique take, in order to, it really kind of feels like a cash grab. We're going to release something that's already been released twice, once in film and once in print, and now we're going to do print again. But I kind of like this idea of taking it from the perspective of a companion that experienced it and seeing if you can kind of make it different enough and unique to make it a compelling story. So I'll be interested to see what they do with it.
Well, and the way they're framing it, if I remember correctly, there was, because it talks about in the press release that after defending a space station from the Cyberman incursion, the Doctor and Jamie, take Zoe wished on them or with them, and giving her a warning, the Doctor places the TARDIS out of time and space and uses the mind projector to give adventures. And I think I remember that actually happening on television too. So it's like they're taking that perspective and adding Jamie's story to it.
Yes.
Which I think is a clever way to go about doing it.
And so nobody's confused. This is a Victoria story, but the premise is that they're showing Zoe this past adventure with that mind visualizer. So, speaking of which, that's going to come to play in Players as well. What do you think, Sean? You're awful quiet on this one.
Initially, I was very much of the cash grab opinion, but hearing a little more about it, okay. Well, it could be an interesting way of doing it.
Yeah.
Well, and especially considering if it's from Jamie's perspective and what Jamie goes through in The Evil of the Daleks, questioning the Doctor as much as he does.
Yes.
It'll be, if they play that aspect up, it'll make it a very interesting story.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
That's true. And our last bit of news?
I'll let you take this one, Glenn.
Yeah, so this is the we finally got the details on Doomsday, the multimedia event that they're going to do an hour-by-hour timeline breakdown of the character who has she's got 24 hours to save her life. She's got to find the doctor. So they went ahead and released some details on this, and it looks like we're going to get hour 1 will be a digital release. Hour 2 is going to be 2 through 5 are going to be a 16-page comic in Doctor Who magazine, coming out later this month, just actually next week. And then hours 6 through 7 is the Titan, part 1 of the Titan comic involvement. And then for hours 8 through 9 is A Doctor in the House. Oh, that's part 2. So yeah, 8 and 9 are part 2 of that series. So those are back to back. For hour 10, it's AI and the Doctor. That'll be the Lost in Time East End games that Keith reviewed a few weeks back. That's the video game that you can play on mobile, passive video game. Hours 11 through 14 is Extraction Point, and that'll be our novel from Penguin Random House and M.G. Harris. And then hour 15 is Wrong Place, Wrong Time. That's the second part of the Doctor Who Lost in Time. There's a split up. I knew one of these entities was split. Hour 16 and through 19 is For From Doomsday, and that is the BBC audio that's being released. And then hours 20 to 23, Dawn of the Everlasting, will be the big Finish production offering from those guys. And then it will wrap back around for the 24th hour, I believe, will be back to digital, and they're going to close it out, I think, on the website, probably like they have done now. The first one is already available on the Doctor Who website, doctorwho.tv, so you can go there and read that short story. And I think if I remember right, who wrote that? I had that in my head. I think it's, what's his name? That did the, James Goss, that did the, what was the last crossover event they did? Time Lord Victorious.
Oh, Time Lord Victorious.
Could not think of what it was. I think it's Voss. Yeah, or James Goss. Yeah, he wrote hour 1 of this, so it's interesting that I wonder how much of a hand he's got in this crossover event as well.
It may be worth mentioning now that if it sounds like Doomsday is going to be a fairly big chunk of things to review, it is, and we will be adjusting the upcoming schedule accordingly to incorporate more of it, and we will be putting our Time War discussions on hold, at least temporarily, as we have mucho content for the 60th anniversary and a lot of season 6B stuff to do as well. So we'll get more into that later when we do the schedule, but just give everybody a heads up on that.
Absolutely.
You are invited on an adventure across all of time and space, in a completely random order. It's the Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. Jump in the TARDIS with your hosts,
Eric Gulbranson, Asad Kheshki,
and
Matthew Kressel.
Explore Doctor Who TV stories, audio adventures, and books, both novels and non-fiction. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. It's the entire Whoniverse on shuffle. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast is a member of the Direction Point Network and is available about once a month wherever you find your podcasts. You are listening to Traveling the Vortex.
This week's review is Doctor Who World Game, the Past Doctor Adventure book featuring the Second Doctor.
By Darren Sticks. The Doctor has been captured and put on trial by his own people, accused of their greatest crime, interfering with the affairs of other peoples and planets. He is sentenced to exile on Earth. That much is history. But now the truth can be told. The Doctor does not go straight into exile. First, the Time Lords have a task for him. From the trenches of the Great War to the terrors of the French Revolution, the Doctor finds himself on a mission he does not want, with a companion he does not like. his life threatened at every turn. Will the Doctor survive his sentence, or will this adventure prove to be his Waterloo?
Dun, dun, dun. I liked it.
Yeah,
I
I
liked it a lot.
give it a dun dun dun.
Yeah, it's not without its problems, but I liked it. Sean, what don't you like about it? I just putting you on the spot because you didn't jump in with a dun dun dun.
Jump to the dun,
I
dun,
always
dun.
think, what did Sean think?
You've not experienced Uncle Terrence until you've read him in the original Klingon. I think is no, it seemed for a quote unquote historical, it seemed very full of ideas, possibly too many. We're going along and we're getting, elements of the story and elements of history and elements of this plot, and then a vampire will show up. And yes, it's explained later, but at the same time, it was just kind of like, what? Or okay, well, there's just going to be, there are all these plots to assassinate people. We've got exploding carriages, and we've got just this, that, and the other. And then a Rastan robot shows up. It's like, what? It was like Terrence Dick's greatest hits in some ways. It's like, yeah, I'm going to throw that in there too. It's like, man, we're really got a lot going on here. Are you sure you want to? Yeah, you're going to do that. Okay. So it wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination. It just seemed at times a little too full.
See, I'm going to counter that because I thought that that's what I liked about this book, is that I felt like Terrence Dicks, he doesn't dwell on anything for very long. And so we get something that happens, it gets resolved, and we move on. And so I felt like it's paced really well, because a lot of writers will get very bogged down in getting very detailed in the action and dragging the action of different scenes out for like 2 or 3, chapters. Whereas Dix, he kind of gets to it, he does his thing, and then we move on. And I think there's a lot of that. And I think there's
a lot of that. Yeah.
I think that's probably why you think it feels maybe too overstuffed, because there's a lot. But I think that's what I like, because you're never bored. You never feel like, okay, can we get on from this part? Because there's a lot of times that happens in stories, and even particularly past Doctor Adventure stories that I've read, where you kind of feel like you get a little bogged down in the minutiae about what's going on. And with Terrence, it's very much just nope, this is what happened, and this is what's resolved. And I actually, I thought the same thing, Sean, about Terrence Dick's greatest hits. Because he is responsible for the Rastan robot, and he wrote State of Decay as well, right? So, I mean, it really is him going back to the well, his own well, a couple of times. And I think the only thing that I was disappointed about with that is we've got these mysterious, I'm going to use the word players because we've got a little more insight with them now because of the other book, but we've got these players that are basically just playing a game. And the Doctor says that there must be some Time Lord connection or intervention or something, because they're getting these, Time Lord elements from somewhere. And I don't really think they explain later the connection to that. And I think that's where those two things kind of fall down, because I don't remember them ever resolving why they had the access to them. And
they resolve them, but they don't explore it at all.
Right. That's what I mean, is they don't really explore it. Yeah. So, and I wanted a little more of that. And maybe Terrence was leaving that open to explore in a further book, because I really felt like, and I don't want to get too much into the details of players, but I think players kind of does that too, where you could tell he was setting up more to this world than what you get in either of these books. So, but that's what I liked about it, was the fact that I don't think they dwelled too long on the action. I think Terrence Dicks is a fan of history. I think for historical, there are a lot of interesting accuracies in this. I think there are some things that he takes some liberties with in the story, but I think for the most part, the characters in the book are even more realistic, because the things that happen are based on or near similar to events that happened in history. And you actually, from this one, get what I think the core of the show started as, with the historicals. We were going to teach you something about history. And I came away from this book going, you know what? I learned a little bit of history. And then I it intrigued me enough to go look into more of Napoleon's time and those, surrounding him and his dictatorship. And so it worked on that level as well, where it got me very interested in the Napoleon story.
Yeah, I think that's what it does best, is having the players and the history interweave with each other. Using the players and them trying to manipulate the past in order to win their game is a very clever way to explain the situation, especially to the new companion, and therefore the reader, what's supposed to be going on, as opposed to what's actually going on. Mm-hmm. So you get both the alternate history and the actual history lesson at the same time, which I think is really clever. And then you get to get a cool sequence where you travel to the future and see what happens when these players win, and how things could go wrong if one person dies. I mean, there's a lot of that stuff in this that I really appreciated and thought was really, really clever. I would agree that the vampire and the Rastan warrior robot just come out of nowhere and don't really get resolved very well. I mean, they get resolved of who is behind it, but we don't know why or how they were involved with it. And I think overall, he has the tone of the second Doctor down for the most part, and I think it's a great installment of season 6B. I really liked it.
I knew you'd appreciate the alt history stuff.
Yeah. Well, and just, I don't know much about Napoleon or what was going on. So, on the heels of Reign of Terror, which had nice references to, getting kind of a crash course in what's going on in France at the time was a nice way to, bring me up to speed and make me not feel dumb while reading the book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest problem with the Napoleonic War stuff was that there was not one water slide at Waterloo. That's clearly been established in history. So I wasn't sure about that.
So now, as it relates to season 6B, here's what I'm finding with at least these takeoff stories that we've, and I call them takeoff stories because these are the stories that are supposed to lead us into season 6B. It really kind of feels like everybody's just kind of doing their own, this is how season 6B gets started, or this is how the Doctor gets recruited into the Time Lords. And I kind of feel like I'm having to do mental gymnastics to make everything sort of work, because it's like every story we've done so far, and one of the stories we've done so far has been a Terrence Dicks story, is where we're establishing at least 3 different ways that the Time Lords are recruiting the second Doctor in order to work for them, for the CIA. So I appreciate that everybody wants their take on it, but I kind of want everybody to be on the same page and say, okay, this is the definitive, this is how we got started, and then we go from there and tell season 6B stories beyond that. We don't have to keep restarting how. Now, to be fair, this would be the first, well, not this particular book.
This was 2005.
Yeah, but this was right? Actually the book, this and Players was Terrence Dick's first acknowledgement of saying, hey, you know what? I like this fan theory that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to play into that. And based on that is what made the Doctor Who website perk up and say, okay, we're going to make this quasi-official as well, because they had that one, particular page on there that explored that as well. So this is really Terrence Dick's starting the ball rolling. So we have to give him credit for, I think his should have been the definitive end. Not that it doesn't make the Big Finish story, Second Doctor Adventures, work, because I think that, again, you can do some mental gymnastics and finagling and use Terrence Dick's short story that he wrote that, does the mind wipe kind of thing where the Doctor kind of resets and doesn't realize what's going on. I think you could, if you really got down to the minutiae of it, you could kind of, jump through some hoops and make it work. But I just really I want to get away from them telling us that how he started now, because I'm getting kind of, it's getting a little convoluted. Let's just get on with it.
Well, that's the brilliance of that short story that we reviewed last time, is that it gives us a fresh slate anytime we have one contradicting story of how it starts or anything else. It's just okay, from the Doctor's perspective, it's a brand new time. It's a brand new time. It's a brand new time. So it doesn't, now that we've had that short story, none of that bothers me anymore.
Yeah. Just to touch on the Players a little bit, the book that the Players was actually the first book that Terrence wrote that connected season 6B. It precedes it, Sixth Doctor and Perry's story, and
it's the first Players in general.
Yes,
that's where they first appear.
Yes, that's where they make their first appearance. Now, I think that leads to some inconsistency with the Countess player, although at the end of Players they kind of gave the implication that they've been doing this for so long and the game sort of resets itself that they don't necessarily even remember some of the last games that they played. So I kind of think that's a pass to give you, okay, well, that's why the Countess is a bit inconsistent here, because now we're technically going back and telling the Second Doctor story, because Sean, when the Doctor goes off to check out if his friends had been returned to the right timelines, and he goes away, and they do the little setup with Serena in the office that, she's going to kind of be his, carer and watch over him and make sure he does everything right, doesn't, get out of hand. While they're doing that, he's gone, obviously, and then they realize he's in front of a firing squad before they take him out of there at the last second. Well, about three chapters of the Players book deals with what happened at that time.
Leading all up to that.
Right. That was kind of a fun look back. And we were just talking about how they're going to use the mind visualizer for the Evil of the Daleks book. He actually uses the mind visualizer in order to show Perry this story that happened during his second incarnation. So that's actually utilized again as well. So,
and what's kind of interesting is I haven't finished Endgame, so there's 3 stories that feature the Players.
Yeah, and I haven't even started Endgame.
And Sean, it looks like according to Goodreads, you have read Endgame about 7 or 8 years ago, according to yeah, according to Goodreads, you read it.
That's what 50.
It's an 8th Doctor story set during the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
But what's kind of...
well,
I haven't met her yet, but I understand the Countess even shows up in it.
Mm-hmm. I will have to put the jumper cables on my brain and look into that, because if it says I did it, I must have logged it.
But what's kind of interesting as far as like the player context goes, it seems there's several references within, I think, the Players and World Game about their ability to time travel also.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost comes across, of course, not having finished Endgame, it almost comes across like they did this stuff with Churchill, failed, did this stuff in the Cold War, failed, so they tried to go back further for Napoleon, and then failed and gave up.
So that makes sense, and that actually works better along the lines of how this is told, because I think the other thing that, and this doesn't work for this now that I think about it, but the other thing that bothered me was that I felt both books, World Game and Doctor Who, gave the impression that they were traveling through time, but then in this particular book, World Game, they're deciding that they want to capture the Doctor's TARDIS in order to utilize that, because there's something is said that makes you think that they don't necessarily have the time travel ability that they want to have. And so it almost feels like they're going to take his TARDIS in order to do that. And I thought, okay, well, wait a minute. How are they already traveling through time and they need the ability to travel through time? That seemed a little inconsistent to me as well.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, I remember that also. So it's just inconsistencies within his own writing, really, more
than probably, yeah.
And not knowing how Endgame ends. I mean, because the way World Game ends, it's kind of like okay, Doctor, you beat us, we give up, we're going home. And they've been doing this for how long? And really, I don't buy that.
Right.
It seems like they need to be defeated more thoroughly, or something more concrete than just, okay, we give up, you win. Which is how the book ends, which is kind of a disappointing ending, honestly, is well, okay, we defeated them in this situation, and it does give that feeling of, okay, there's going to be a continuation of events with these players trying to interfere and play their game.
Right.
But now, having read Players and mostly through Endgame, it doesn't seem like he really followed through on that.
Okay.
Well, apparently I gave it 3 stars, but did not leave a review.
I'm assuming it was one of the times where we did all our own book reviews. I think there was there one time where
you're right,
where one of us was gone, and Sean and I, or I must have been you, Glenn, or I guess I could have been gone.
Yeah.
And because I know there was one point I did a 8th Doctor story, 8th Doctor book. I don't know if that was at the same time.
I remember
and the description here is absolutely no help, because the Doctor has amnesia. Oh.
It's very much a spy.
Again.
A spy game.
I want to say that I do remember this, but I don't know that I can see a whole lot of parallels for how that particular story fit in with the Players. Maybe I'm wrong.
And so far in Endgame, it's been very player light, which has made it a little bit of a slog. So just heads up, Glenn. It's a fine spy Cold War story so far, but the Doctor's not the Doctor because he has amnesia. A little too violent sometimes in my taste, and there's one player so far popping up occasionally and not very often.
It's too bad it's too bad that Terrence Dicks couldn't write the 8th Doctor very well, because that was the 8 Doctors, the one that kicks off the 8th Doctor adventures, has always been kind of panned by fans that it's not very good. I enjoyed it. I loved it. I read it and loved it, but he certainly doesn't get the 8th Doctor right in some occasions, and maybe because they were the first ones doing it. Obviously, those were the first 8th Doctor stories that were out there. That was pre-Big Finish. That was, right after Virgin New Adventures. So maybe he was just finding his footing.
Well, and even, I can kind of excuse what he's doing because the Doctor has amnesia yet again. But
yeah,
as far as Endgame goes, it's not quite as grabbing of a story because there are some historical characters, but there's no one real persona that it's circling around like it did with Churchill and it did with Napoleon.
Okay. Does the Doctor still have 2 hearts?
He does.
Okay.
I think.
At one time,
they haven't really mentioned it.
At one time in that era, and the only reason we know that is because it's brought up in one of the books that we reviewed, he's without one heart for a while.
They did make reference that when he's in the hospital that they had some very confusing results and just kind of overlooked it.
But back to this one, I thought it was an enjoyable read. I think that that's what I like about Terrence Dicks so far is yes, maybe there are a lot of things happening here, but I think to its benefit for me that I don't get bored with what's happening, because something happens, there's a climax, it's resolved, and then we move on to the next thing. And I sort of liked the idea of them jumping around and having to go be one step ahead of the Countess in most instances so that they could, thwart any interference that was happening. And what I really liked, and I didn't expect to, because when they set the character up, you're not supposed to really kind of like her because you think she's going to be this staunch, by the book, sort of how, early days Romana, and they're always calling out the Doctor and reeling him in, but Serena really doesn't. She kind of, that character I think is built upon and to a point where you have a lot of sympathy for her. And then when she ends up in front of the bullet to save the Duke, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Or not Duke. I'm getting my books crossed. Oh yeah, the Duke of Wellington.
No, that was a Duke.
Yeah. And so when she ends up taking the bullet, I'm like, no, I was really liking this character. Why did you take her away from me? I would have liked to have seen this go on. Maybe he could have, traveled with her for a little while and they could have had a few adventures, but now she's gone and I'm so upset. So I think he really develops that character, and the Doctor and her relationship are told really well as well.
Yeah, I agree. I really came to like her.
I agree as well. It's something that I did not expect to. In fact, I'll be honest, I was dreading her a little bit when she was first introduced, because it's like, oh, you've got a new Romana. Oh, she's going to be that Romana. Okay. But as it went, I liked the fact that she, despite herself, was open-minded enough to see things that, the Doctor constantly surprised her. And then from the Doctor's point of view, she constantly surprised him. And so it turned into a really delightful little pairing. And then it was snatched away from us.
Tragically. And heroically, though. So,
what year was this again, Keith? Did you say this came out 2005?
2005.
So the new series obviously was already back for a little bit, because he makes reference to the psychic paper in this as well. The invitation is done on psychic paper, and I think Terrence must have said, I like that idea from the series. let's put that in here. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And they don't do much. They don't draw much attention to it. They say what it is. No, they don't even say psychic paper, but they say what it will do. And you kind of take it from there. And then he kind of, after it's used, he kind of tucks it away and this might come in handy again sometime. And then that's all they do with it. So I thought that was kind of clever.
Makes you wonder why he never remembered it and pulled it out.
Yeah, right. Well, then I kind of wondered if maybe at some point the CIA was going to take it back from him. Maybe he got lost in the TARDIS. Maybe he that jacket that he had. That was the other thing about this and Players that I will say is that the Doctor is out of costume, out of typical costume frequently. Terrence Dicks is not afraid to put the TARDIS away and set it aside. He uses it a little bit more in World Game because we have to bounce around more, but he's not afraid to put it aside and put the Doctor and companion of the book in, a townhouse or a hotel or anywhere that, to taking up residency for a short period of time. And so I kind of like that, because when you're dealing with a television series and you have only so many episodes, you don't really consider where is the Doctor staying at this time. if time passes for any length of time, the Doctor has gone back to the TARDIS in some instances in the TV show. In the book, where you've got a lot more of a long form to tell, and you've got so many more days to have the Doctor placed somewhere that makes sense as to where, why he's got to stay here for a while. Well, where do you put him? You put him in a, hotel, or you put him in. So that was really kind of refreshing to go, okay, that's something we don't get a lot of times from other media. And so I like that he's not afraid to do that here.
And what's also clever is he sets up in players, or in he retroactively sets up the bank account that he pulls from in players in this story.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Which I thought was a really nice thing that he thought of to kind of tie it back to the original novel that spawned it all.
Right. I forgot about that.
I thoroughly liked it. This is a book that if I come pick up, or if I find somewhere, I would definitely pick it up, because I thoroughly enjoyed it and would probably go back and reread it again.
I have to wonder how much of a resemblance, although they do make mention that, he's, if you got up close to him, you would obviously tell the difference. But I wonder how much the second Doctor actually does resemble Napoleon.
A short little dark-haired guy.
Yeah.
What do you want?
They do certainly have that in common, I guess.
With the hat on, I mean, come on.
Yeah, the hat and the uniform, I suppose, then it's a dead ringer.
Yep.
Well, now we have to wonder if perhaps Salamander, if he perhaps is in some way a distant relation to Napoleon.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
I like it.
I do too.
There's a little headcanon for you.
Hello, fellow time travelers, and welcome to the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, the only podcast to discuss, in story order, all the Doctor Who novelizations. My name is Tony Whitt, and every 2 weeks or so, I'm joined by a 2 to 3 person discussion panel, including our so-called expert who's been a Who fan since 1979. That would be me. We also get the views of intermediate, casual, and novice fans who either have never seen the show or who have never read these books until these podcasts, including
Dalton Hughes
and
Alison Fitz-Seyfried.
You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you find good podcasts, or even ones like ours. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex, a Direction Point podcast.
Let's talk about the schedule. What do we got coming up, Sean?
Well, coming up next on the schedule, we return to the 60th anniversary tie-in stories with Time Slip and Star Beast, the next Doctor Who weekly comics that from that era, and then the comic strip adaptation, Doctor Who and the Star Beast, from Big Finish. So we'll be doing another compare and contrast on those. Then we get Once in Future, the artist at the end of the universe, continuing on with that Big Finish story, along with the next 4 comics in the ongoing 14th Doctor comic strip from Doctor Who Magazine and Liberation of the Daleks. So that'll be parts 5 through 8. And then some more 60th anniversary tie-in stuff with Doomsday. We're going to do the first hour of the aforementioned Doomsday, which was the social media on the Doctor Who website, and then hours 2 through 5, which are in Doctor Who Magazine. I believe it's 592, if you're following along at home. And then we will return to 6B. So lots of good stuff coming up.
That's right. So keep it here, keep it close. And of course, you can find us at travelingthevortex.com. That's our website. There you can find a link to our Patreon page and consider supporting us. When you become a patron of the podcast, you unlock specials by us. We've got some more goodies coming up. There is I think the most recent thing is the Great Traveling Vortex quiz show number 5 is on there now. Or quiz number 5 is on there. And then Sean's got some more Star Trek coming around the corner. The most recent thing we did was we reviewed Problem Child 2, which was our losing the Pod versus Pod Oscar contest against the ladies. So actually we didn't lose, we tied, but that was the movie of their choice for us to review. And so we've got that up on our Patreon, and you get that exclusively before other listeners do. So you can hear what we thought of that terrible movie. Not so terrible. But yeah, if you could just if you could just give us at least $1 a month, that helps very much. And if everybody gave $1, we could do so much more with the podcast and keep it going for a long time. So every little bit helps. We love that. Also, please consider giving us a 5-star review wherever you subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you join in the conversations on our Listen Forum on Facebook, and you can follow us at Travel Vortex on Twitter. Give us a shout out there if you'd like. Anything else before we close this one? If not, until next time, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing you.
Thanks for listening.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.
Direction point! Direction point!
A Doctor Who podcast network.